Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are. Welcome to our webinar today on understanding dyscalculia and how early identification can transform outcomes. We've started the webinar just a couple of minutes early this morning, and we've got quite a high number of people expected to join us. So whilst we are waiting, if you want to pop in the chat, a quick hello and where you're from, it's always nice to see where people are just from across the world. So do feel free to say a quick hello, and then we will get started in about a minute's time. Morning, Alexandra from Spain. I'm Tracy in Dorset. Nice to see you join us this morning. Already lots of different locations, which is always really exciting. Lots of UK colleagues this morning, which is lovely. We normally get quite a high number of international participants, which is also lovely. Oh, I see someone from the Wirral there, Debbie.
Yes,
Just down the road from you. Great. And we've got people joining us from Uganda, UAE. A real mixed bunch this morning. Fantastic. I can see our participant numbers are still going up, so we'll just give it a couple more minutes just so people don't miss the start. Leeds Bradford Airport, good morning. Qatar. Fantastic. It's lovely to have so many of you with us this morning. Now I will get going. I'm sure people will have busy afternoons or busy days ahead. So we are due to start at 8 o'clock, so I will make a start now. Really excited to have you with us today. Hopefully, we've got lots of different people with different roles on the webinar this morning, and whatever your role is within your education setting, hopefully this session will provide valuable insights into dyscalculia and some practical solutions for identification. So over the next 20 minutes, we will look at what dyscalculia is. So we'll explore that topic. Why early identification matters. I'm sure we all know that, but we will just cover that. How the GL assessment dyscalculia screener can support your school into identifying learners who may be struggling with this specific learning difficulty. So Debbie's going to start us off, so I will pass you over to Debbie this morning.
Thank you, Polly. So let's begin with the fundamental question: what exactly is dyscalculia? Dyscalculia is a specific learning difficulty that affects a person's ability to acquire arithmetical skills. It's sometimes called number blindness or maths dyslexia, though these terms don't quite capture the full picture. It's important to understand that dyscalculia is not the same as simply being bad at maths or having maths anxiety, though these can certainly co-occur. Dyscalculia is a neurological condition that affects how the brain processes numerical information. Research suggests that approximately 5 to 7% of the population has dyscalculia. That's roughly 1 to 2 students in every classroom. Yet, despite being as prevalent as dyslexia, it remains significantly underidentified and undersupported. Let's look at some of the key indicators. Students with dyscalculia have difficulties with understanding number magnitude. For example, knowing that 8 is larger than 3. They also struggle with subitizing, the ability to recognize small quantities without actually counting the numbers. They struggle with remembering basic number facts, even after repeated practice. They also struggle with place value, telling the time, or managing money. And in addition, they can find it very difficult to estimate quantities or measurements. And crucially, these difficulties persist despite adequate teaching and are not explained by general cognitive ability. A student with dyscalculia may excel in other subjects, but consistently struggle with anything at all that is numerical. The emotional impact shouldn't be underestimated either. Many learners with unidentified dyscalculia can experience significant anxiety, low self-esteem, and become disengaged from learning entirely. I'm now going to pass you back to Polly, who'll dive into this a little bit more deeply.
Thank you, Debbie. Yeah, I think it's really important to understand what a difficulty to look like, but then it brings us on to that critical point of why does early identification matter so much? And I'm sure if you're all here from a school setting, we know that with anything, with any special educational need, with any barriers to learning, the earlier it's identified, the earlier you can put support in place and support those students. So, as with everything else, without proper identification, students with dyscalculia can fall through the gaps. Now, they might be students might be labelled as lazy, not trying hard enough, or simply not a maths person. And I'm sure we all know that is just simply not true. But those labels, even if we're stamping them or they're just sort of generally placed on a student, can have lasting consequences, and not just academically, but for their confidence and future opportunities. And I think it's important to consider numeracy skills are essential for everyday life, and it's finding that purpose for numeracy to support those students. So if we think about the things we do every day, where we manage finances, understanding health information, so when you get results through from the doctor's surgery and understanding what those numbers mean, following recipes, so that everyday cooking, so not just complexities, but everyday things, reading timetables, so managing to get to travel, to get on buses, planes, trains. And the statistics tell us that adults with poor numeracy are more likely to be unemployed and also earn lower wages. So the stakes are genuinely high. So that early identification really allows schools to implement that targeted intervention before those gaps become so insurmountable that it's hard to unpick where to even start. And providing those appropriate accommodations and support. And really importantly, building a student's confidence through understanding. And I think that's where that sort of real life purpose does come into play. I know when I struggled with different areas of maths at school, when I could see the purpose behind it, it made a lot more sense to me. Involving parents and carers in supporting the learning at home and accessing additional resources, or funded where needed, and also where it is available. We know that funding can be really tricky to come across. And research consistently shows that early intervention does lead to better outcomes. And the brain is flexible in the early years. It's flexible throughout throughout life. We can that neuroplasticity and we can change. But in those early years, it's particularly flexible, making it the optimal time to provide the support. But as I just said, identification at any age is valuable. So if you've got learners who are older, don't panic. It is not too late to understand what's going on and support them as a learner. So Debbie's now going to look at how we can identify dyscalculia and then how we can support those students going forward.
Thank you, Polly. So how do we actually identify dyscalculia? This is where the GL assessment, Dyscalculia Screener, comes in. The Dyscalculia Screener was developed by Professor Brian Butterworth, one of the world's leading researchers in mathematical cognition. It's designed specifically to identify dyscalculic tendencies in learners aged 6 to 14 years. What makes this screener particularly valuable is its focus on the core deficits associated with dyscalculia. Rather than simply measuring mathematical achievement, it looks at the foundational number processing skills that underpin all mathematical learning. Let's break down how it works. The screener is computer-based and takes approximately 15 to 30 minutes to complete, and it assesses 4 key areas. So if we have a look here, we've got key areas here. So the first is simple reaction time. This is a control measure that accounts for general processing speed, ensuring that we're measuring numerical processing specifically, not just how fast a student can respond to any stimulus. The second is dot enumeration. This measures structurizing ability and counting skills. Students are shown dot patterns and asked how many dots they see. The speed and accuracy of responses reveal important information about numerical processing. Thirdly, we have number comparison. This assesses the understanding of numerical magnitude. Students identify which of 2 numbers is the larger. This taps into the fundamental number sense that dyscalculic learners often do struggle with. And lastly, we have addition and multiplication. So we've got arithmetic achievement, simple addition and multiplication problems that measure basic fact retrieval. While this is more of an achievement measure, it provides important context about the student's learning. The combination of these measures allows the screener to differentiate between students who have genuine dyscalculic tendencies and those who may be underperforming in maths for other reasons. One of the great strengths of this tool is that it's standardized against a large representative sample. This means the results are reliable and comparable. Each student receives a detailed report showing their performance across all areas. And you can see a Dyscalculia screener teacher practitioner report shown on the screen at the moment. The reports categorize into risk levels, from those showing strong dyscalculic tendencies who need immediate support, to those with some indication who should be monitored, to those who are performing typically. I'm now going to pass you back to Polly, who will talk about how schools can implement the Dyscalculia screener.
Thanks, Debbie. As you can see, the screener is very simple to administer. The subtests are very straightforward. And as such, the screener can be administered by teachers, SENCOs, teaching assistants, any member of staff within your school. You don't need to be an educational psychologist or have any specific qualification to use it. So it makes it really accessible and scalable. You can screen whole classes all in one go, or you can do it one-to-one, whatever suits you and your students. Many schools do use it as part of their identification process where concerns are raised about a student's maths progress. Like I say, others use it more broadly to screen whole year groups. particularly in years 2 or 3, when those dyscalculic tendencies often become more apparent. However, there's no limit. As Debbie mentioned, it can be used from students age 6 all the way up to 14. However, as with any assessment, the results should be considered alongside other information. So do use it alongside teacher observations, samples of work that the students have produced, the history, so the students' history, have they always struggled with maths? Is there just a specific concept they're really struggling rather than it being dyscalculia as a whole? All those things that you're busy collecting in schools. And also, where possible, talk to the student about their own experiences as well, get their voice included. And then once identification has happened, schools can then develop their targeted intervention plans. And based on the results, that might look a little bit different for individual students and individual settings. So it might include just some small tweaks to everyday teaching and learning. So you might use more concrete manipulatives to build number sense. And so lots of hands-on practical things that students can use. I always remember when I was teaching, we always got the counting bears out for the younger students. They were always really popular to help with counting. Using multi-sensory approaches to learning number facts. Making sure there is additional time for maths activity, additional time for processing. Technology support. So sometimes things like calculators are seen as a bit of a negative. Obviously, it does depend on what you're trying to achieve from your learning outcomes. But if a calculator can support particularly older students, then why not use one? Obviously, like I said, depends what you're trying to achieve. And then small group or one-to-one intervention programs. Now, the screener also provides valuable evidence when applying for additional support or building cases. So if you're applying here in the UK for an education, health and care plan, for example, you can use the data from the assessments as evidence to back up your application. So the sort of the dyscalculia screener is a great starting point, helps you alongside your context and your observations to understand where a student may be struggling. And then from that, you can then decide what level of intervention is needed. Like I say, small tweaks to the everyday classroom intervention, or maybe a further referral on to a specialist in the area. So I will now hand back to Debbie, who is just going to wrap up for today. And we've got some links to pop in the chat as well. So I'll hand back to Debbie.
Thank you, Polly. As we wrap up, we want to emphasize that identifying dyscalculia is truly life-changing for learners. It replaces confusion and frustration with the understanding and targeted support. Every student deserves to understand their own learning profile and receive appropriate support. The GL assessment Dyscalculia screener is a powerful tool in making this happen. If you would like some more information on the Dyscalculia screener, please do complete the poll, which will now appear on the screen. Give you a couple of minutes if you'd like to complete that poll. We will also pop some links to additional resources into the chat for you. There is also a Dyscalculia network. The Dyscalculia network is a leading community interest company supporting individuals with dyscalculia, and we'll put the link to the Dyscalculia network into the chat. Also, in a previous Send Searchlights episode, we were very lucky to be joined by Pete Jarrett, an educator and cognitive scientist and consultant with a background in adult and further education psychology and data science. If you missed that session, or if you did see the session and would you like to look at it again, you can listen to it by following the link that we will put into the chat. That's all we do have time for today, but we hope that you will join us again on the 12th of May, where we will be visiting working memory, highlighting how it can impact our learners in the school setting and exploring ways in which we can support our learners with working memory. Thank you all so much for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you again on the 12th of May. Thank you.
Thank you.